They say miracles don't always fall from heaven sometimes. They walk on four paws and wait beside an old garage door. In the sun-bleached town of Copper Creek, a U.S. Army veteran named Ethan Cole fights to keep his late father's repair shop alive with more faith than funds, and a German shepherd named Rex who's as loyal as the God that kept them both breathing through the storms. Every day, Ethan fixes what others have given up on: engines, broken hearts, maybe even himself. Then one fateful afternoon, a dust-covered motorcycle crashes outside his shop. Its rider, Alexandra Sterling, a tech billionaire who vanished from the world, is about to find that grace doesn't live in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the quiet bond between a soldier, his dog, and the stranger God sent their way. Because sometimes the greatest miracles don't roar with thunder, they rumble to life in the hands of those who still believe. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got another story of faith, love, and the small miracles that still walk this earth. The desert wind had a way of remembering. It carried with it the dry scent of copper and oil, the faint cry of distant coyotes, and the ghost of things left unsaid. In Copper Creek, a half-forgotten town pressed between red hills and the bones of an old highway, the world moved slowly, like an old clock that still kept time even after losing its chime. Inside a small garage at the edge of town, Ethan Cole wiped the grease from his hands and set a wrench back into its place. Every tool had its spot. Every bolt had its rule. The order mattered. For a man like him, rules were what kept the ghosts quiet. He was 45, tall, built like someone who had spent half his life carrying weight that didn't belong to him. His hair, once dark, had begun to gray at the edges, and his skin held the tan of a man who worked outdoors more than in. His eyes, steel blue and steady, had the kind of calm that only comes from surviving storms no one else saw. A faded tattoo on his forearm read, U.S. Army, 3rd Infantry. The ink had blurred, the way memories do. He still wore his dog tags, tucked under his shirt, not as pride, but as penance. People in town called him the mechanic with a soldier's stare. They didn't know his story, and he didn't offer it. Rex stirred from his place near the open door. The German shepherd was 7 years old, sable fur streaked with black and gold, strong and loyal with the alert patience of a soldier's companion. He had served beside Ethan once, a canine partner, in search and rescue before the Army let them both go. Out here, Rex had become his only friend, his shadow that breathed. The afternoon sun burned low, heat still rolling off the cracked asphalt outside. A storm was coming. Ethan could smell it, that sharp tang of dust before the rain. He glanced at the radio on the counter. The weather channel crackled through static. Visibility dropping fast across Route 12. Strong winds expected through the evening. Figures, he muttered, shutting the radio off. He started closing the bay doors when Rex growled, low and deep. "What is it, boy?" Ethan asked, but the dog was already moving toward the road. Through the curtain of dust outside, a flicker of motion appeared, a motorcycle, swerving, headlights slicing through the storm. The bike skidded sideways, metal scraping, a flash of black leather, and a scream swallowed by wind. Ethan didn't think. He ran. The sand hit like needles, stinging his face as he fought toward the wreck. The bike had crashed into a drainage ditch, steam hissing from the cracked radiator. The rider lay on her side, helmet cracked, one leg trapped under the frame. "Hey, stay still!" he shouted, dropping to his knees. He gripped the burning hot metal, teeth clenched, and heaved. The weight came free. She gasped as he pulled her up, arm around her shoulders. When he looked into her face through the dust, he saw sharp features, a determined jawline, and eyes the color of wet amber. Her lips were cracked, her breathing shallow. She looked mid-30s, maybe younger, the kind of beauty that came not from softness, but from defiance. "Garage is close by," Ethan said, half carrying her as Rex circled anxiously. "You're lucky we heard you." "Lucky," she murmured, almost sarcastically, before her knees buckled. By the time they reached the garage, the storm was a wall of red and gold roaring through the valley. Ethan pulled her inside and slammed the doors. The place rattled under the wind, but held. He eased her onto an old cot in the back corner, one he kept for Rex during cold nights. The dog sat nearby, ears pinned back, eyes watching every move. "You're safe," Ethan said quietly, fetching a damp cloth. "Got any pain?" She opened one eye and tried to smile. "Just my pride." "Good. Pride heals slower." When she laughed, or maybe coughed, the sound cracked through the storm like a spark. Ethan removed her leather jacket, checking her arm for bruises. No broken bones, just scrapes. She wore dark jeans, heavy boots, and a gray undershirt beneath the jacket. Practical, no jewelry, no perfume. A traveler, not a tourist. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "South," she said faintly. "Texas." "That's a long way to get lost." "Guess I took a wrong turn somewhere between success and sane." He raised an eyebrow. "That a town?" She smiled weakly. "Not one worth visiting." The wind howled outside, shaking the doors. Ethan moved to secure them while Rex lay near her, head resting on his paws, but eyes sharp. The dog never trusted easy. But after a few minutes, when she reached out and let her fingers brush his fur, Rex didn't flinch. He only sighed and leaned closer. "Smart dog," she whispered. "Smarter than most people," Ethan said from across the room. The power flickered once, twice, then went out entirely. Darkness folded around them, except for the glow of Ethan's lantern on the counter. He lit another and placed it near her cot. "Storm's bad," he said. "You'll stay here till it passes." "I don't want to intrude." He shrugged. "You already did. Might as well stay warm." She smiled at that, eyes glinting in the dim light. "Do you always talk like a man from an old western? Only when strangers crash into my yard." He poured her some water. When she took the cup, her hand trembled slightly. There was something delicate under the tough exterior, something restless. He recognized it, the look of someone running from something they couldn't name. After a while, her breathing steadied, the rhythm slow and calm. Ethan sat at his workbench, pretending to fix an alternator that didn't need fixing. His thoughts drifted to his father, to the last night before the old man died, when he'd said, "If you fix what's broken, son, you keep the world from falling apart, piece by piece." He'd laughed then. It had sounded simple at the time. It never was. When the storm finally began to die, the garage smelled of wet sand and iron. The silence that followed was deep and heavy. Ethan turned off the lantern and leaned back in his chair. Rex moved to lie beside the cot, one paw touching the woman's boot, as if standing guard. Ethan studied her in the faint light, the crease of exhaustion on her brow, the way she slept with one hand curled, as if holding on to something invisible. He could tell she wasn't just a lost traveler. There was too much calculation in her stillness, too much story behind those bruised knuckles. But that wasn't his business, not yet. He pulled the old quilt from the storage chest and draped it over her shoulders. As he did, she stirred, half awake, and whispered something he couldn't catch. A name, maybe, or a number. "You're safe," he said again, though he wasn't sure she heard. Outside, the storm moved east, leaving Copper Creek washed clean beneath 1,000 new stars. Ethan sat awake until the first hint of dawn edged the sky, listening to the steady breathing of the stranger who had fallen into his quiet world, like a question he wasn't ready to answer. When the morning light finally touched the garage windows, it found them both, the soldier and the wanderer surrounded by silence, dust, and the faint hum of memory still alive in the air. Morning came soft and pale, filtering through the blinds of the garage office in thin golden lines. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so fragile it almost hummed. Dust still hung in the air like mist, glinting whenever the light caught it just right. Outside, the desert looked washed clean, every cactus, every rock sharp and new again. Ethan stood by the window, his hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee that had long gone cold. He hadn't slept much. His thoughts kept circling the same place, the woman lying on the cot in the back room. Her breathing through the night had been light but steady, the rhythm of someone used to sleeping in unfamiliar places. Rex stretched near the door, tail brushing the floor, then trotted toward the back. Ethan followed, the floorboards creaking softly beneath his boots. Alex was awake. She sat up slowly, brushing strands of dark hair from her face. In the daylight, she looked different, younger, more human than the silhouette he'd dragged out of the storm. The sharpness in her eyes was still there, but softer now, tempered by exhaustion. She blinked at him. "You look like a man who's been staring at a wall all night." "Close," he said. "A ceiling." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Thank you. For yesterday. I didn't mean to make your day interesting. Storm did most of the work." Rex padded over and sat near her boots, watching her with the cautious curiosity of a soldier meeting another. She reached down and scratched behind his ear. "Guess he doesn't hold grudges." "He's picky about who he forgives," Ethan replied, setting a steaming mug of coffee on the workbench beside her. "You're lucky." She took the mug, hands wrapping around it for warmth. "I'll take that as a compliment." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So, Texas, huh? Long way to go on a bike." "Was," she corrected. "Not sure where I'm heading now." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That a habit of yours, not knowing?" She looked out the window instead of answering. "Maybe I just got tired of being told where to go." The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just full, the kind that said both had lived long enough to understand quiet could be a kind of truth. After breakfast, Ethan turned his attention to her bike. The wrecked machine sat like a wounded animal in the corner. He crouched beside it, running a finger along the cracked fuel line, the bent footrest, the scorched paint. "Fuel system's gone," he muttered. "But this?" He tapped the wiring under the seat. "This isn't factory work. You've got a security circuit built into the ignition." Alex joined him, crouching down. "You can tell that from one glance?" He shot her a look. "It's kind of my thing." Her gaze met his, a flicker of something almost defensive, then gone. "It's a friend's bike. He's paranoid about theft." Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. "A friend with government-grade encryption?" She smirked. "You'd be surprised what people can buy when they have money." He didn't push it. "Well, your paranoid friend's going to need a new fuel pump, and I'll have to weld the frame back straight. Could take most of the day." "I can help," she offered. "You know how to weld?" "I can learn." He chuckled softly. "All right, just don't burn the place down." By mid-morning, they were both elbow-deep in the kind of work that silenced thoughts. Ethan taught her how to hold the torch steady, how to listen for the sound of a clean weld. She learned quickly, her movements precise, confident. Not the kind of precision you get from a desk job, but from discipline. That detail didn't escape him. Every so often, he caught her glancing at the old photograph pinned to the corkboard above his workbench. A faded picture of a younger Ethan in uniform, arms slung around two fellow soldiers. None of them smiled fully, yet their eyes carried a shared fire. "You miss it?" she asked quietly, at one point, nodding toward the photo. "Some parts," he said, "not the noise." "And the people?" He hesitated. every day. The sound of the torch filled the pause between them. Around noon, Sarah Henderson appeared at the garage door with a paper bag in hand. She was a tall woman in her late 50s, auburn hair streaked with silver and tied into a messy bun. Her sun-browned face carried the warmth of someone who had lived through everything and still believed in kindness. "Well, if it isn't my favorite recluse," she said, hands on her hips. "And who's this mystery woman stealing my customers' attention?" Ethan sighed. "Sarah, meet Alex. Alex, this is Sarah, runs the diner down the road and half the town by rumor." Sarah grinned, extending a flour-dusted hand. "Welcome to Copper Creek, sweetheart. You a traveler or a drifter?" Alex shook her hand with a faint smile. "A little of both, I suppose." "Perfect," Sarah said. "You'll fit right in. Folks here got more stories than tires." She handed Ethan the bag. "Brought sandwiches. Figured you'd forget to eat again." Ethan took it with a nod. "You figure right." As Sarah turned to leave, she gave Alex a knowing look. "Watch out for this one, honey. He fixes cars, not hearts, though he's good at both when he forgets to argue." When she was gone, Alex smirked. "She's something. She's the town's moral compass, a little off-center, but she points north most days." They ate in companionable silence, sitting on the tailgate of Ethan's old pickup outside. The desert stretched wide before them, endless and golden. Alex finished her sandwich and leaned back, watching the horizon. "I used to think the world was supposed to move fast," she said. "That if you weren't chasing something, you were losing." "And now?" Ethan asked. "Now I think maybe I've been running too long to remember what standing still feels like." He nodded slowly. "Standing still's underrated." Rex trotted over then, carrying a wrench in his mouth, tail wagging proudly. Alex laughed. "Guess he wants in on the work." "Always does," Ethan said, taking the wrench. "Saved my life once, you know." "Really?" He nodded. "Afghanistan. Building collapse. He found me under the debris before the others did." Alex's voice softened. "He's loyal." "Yeah," Ethan said, scratching Rex's neck. "He doesn't know how not to be." When the day began to fade, Ethan reassembled the fuel system. The engine roared to life on the first try, smooth and strong. Alex's face lit up with a grin that made the whole room brighter. "You're a magician," she said. He shook his head. "Just a mechanic who refuses to give up." For a moment they just stood there, the hum of the engine between them. There was something in her eyes, gratitude, maybe admiration, but also a sadness that didn't belong to this small town. That night, after the lights dimmed and Rex curled at the foot of the cot, Alex sat outside on the porch step, wrapped in a blanket. The desert wind was gentle now, brushing her hair across her face. Ethan joined her, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. "You ever regret staying here?" she asked. He looked out toward the horizon, where the last glow of sunset lingered. "No, I've had my fill of leaving things behind." She nodded, eyes glimmering in the lantern light. "I think I envy that." Ethan sipped his coffee, studying her profile. Strong jaw, tired eyes, the faint tremor of someone learning to breathe again. He didn't ask what she was running from. He figured the desert would tell him when she was ready. When she finally stood to go inside, Rex followed her. Tail swaying, Ethan stayed out a while longer, listening to the whisper of wind through the empty streets. Somewhere in that sound, he thought he heard the first quiet turning of fate, like an engine stirring to life after years of silence. By the time the sun climbed over Copper Creek, the town had already begun its slow rhythm of life. A lone train horn echoed in the distance, the sound mingling with the hum of cicadas and the low rattle of an old truck rolling past the diner. Dust hung like a veil over everything, golden in the morning light, softening the rough edges of a place that had forgotten ambition but not heart. Ethan guided Alex through the main street, Rex trotting loyally between them. Her motorcycle was fixed and gleaming again, but she'd made no move to leave. She said she wanted to thank the town properly. Ethan suspected it was more than that. They stopped first at Sarah's Diner, a squat white building with red shutters and a crooked sign that read, "Home of the best pie this side of nowhere." The air inside smelled of coffee, cinnamon, and bacon grease, the smell of small-town honesty. Behind the counter, Sarah Henderson was already at work, flipping pancakes and talking to 3 old ranchers seated at the bar. She waved the spatula in greeting. "Well, look who's back. My favorite hermit and the girl from the storm. Sit yourselves down before the biscuits get cold." Alex smiled as she slid into a booth. "It's good to see civilization still has syrup." Sarah laughed, setting down a pot of coffee. "Oh, honey, in this town, syrup's how we hold society together." Ethan poured himself a cup, scanning the room out of habit. The regulars nodded to him, the same quiet acknowledgement he'd come to expect. They respected him, but never pried. Copper Creek had learned long ago that a man's silence could be sacred. Across the room sat Frank Dillard, a retired firefighter in his late 60s with a chest like a barrel and a mustache so thick it could cast shade. He lifted his mug in greeting. "Morning, soldier," he said. "Heard the storm brought you some company." Ethan smirked. "Word travels faster than wind here," Frank chuckled. "That's 'cause the wind's too tired to argue with Sarah." The whole room laughed, that slow, good-hearted laughter that made strangers feel like neighbors. As Alex ate, she couldn't help but watch Ethan. The way people looked at him wasn't pity or fear, it was gratitude. Even the smallest nod carried weight. Finally, she asked quietly, "You built all this trust, fixing cars?" Sarah leaned on the counter, overhearing. "Not just cars, sweetheart. That man once ran into a burning truck to pull out a father and his 2 boys. Didn't even tell anyone till Frank here blabbed." Ethan grunted. "You make it sound more heroic than it was." "It was exactly that," Frank said. "You patched those kids up with duct tape and prayer until the ambulance showed." Alex blinked. "You really did that?" Ethan shrugged. "Seemed like the right thing at the time." Sarah poured more coffee into Alex's cup. "That's how he works. Doesn't think twice. Just does what's right. Everyone in this town owes him something, whether they admit it or not." Alex looked around. For the first time, she saw Copper Creek not as a dying desert town, but as a living organism, every person bound by the small kindnesses of one man. The walls were lined with old photos. Soldiers returning from war, high school graduations, a faded memorial plaque with 30 names etched beneath the words, "For those who served." Among them, one photo caught her eye, Ethan. Younger, cleaner shaven, standing in uniform beside 2 men and a flag snapping in the desert wind. The inscription beneath read, "Cole Veterans Garage, in memory of Sergeant Daniel Cole, 1950, Chapter 2012. She turned to him. "Your father?" Ethan nodded, his voice low. "Yeah. He built this place after Vietnam. Said machines were easier than people." Sarah chuckled softly. And look at him now, fixing both. Outside, the bell over the diner door jingled as 2 teenagers came in. Caleb Dunn, 19, wiry with dark curls, and his friend Miguel Torres, 22, broad-shouldered and shy. Both wore grease-stained coveralls. Caleb greeted Ethan with an easy grin. "Morning, Mr. Cole. The carburetor on the old Ford's acting up again." "Then quit talking about it and bring it in," Ethan said, though a small smile betrayed his amusement. Caleb laughed. "You got it, sir." The boy's respect wasn't forced. It was earned. When they left, Alex asked, "They work for you?" "Sometimes. They hang around the shop when they're not at the ranch. Keeps them out of trouble." Sarah added, "He's being modest. Half the kids here learn something from him. not just engines, but decency. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, as if praise itched. They just need direction. Alex studied him, realizing he carried the quiet burden of someone who never stopped serving, even when the war ended. By late afternoon, the diner had emptied, except for the hum of the ceiling fan and the smell of pie cooling on the counter. Sarah wiped her hands and sat across from Alex. "You seem curious about our town, sweetheart," she said. "Not many stop long enough to care." Alex hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of her mug. Maybe I forgot what caring looked like. Sarah's eyes softened. "Well, you picked the right town to remember. Copper Creek may be small, but it still believes in good people, especially the ones who don't believe in themselves." Ethan glanced up, meeting Alex's gaze across the table. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Two souls used to being lost, now caught in the same map. That evening, Ethan walked her back to the garage. The desert sky was painted in bruised shades of purple and gold. Crickets had begun their nightly chorus, and the wind carried the smell of sage and gasoline. "You don't talk much," Alex said as they walked. "Most folks around here say too much. Try to balance the ratio." She smirked. "Does that include me?" "Not yet," he said, almost smiling. When they reached the garage, the lights were low. Rex padded out to greet them, tail wagging. Alex knelt to stroke his fur, her voice gentle. "He's protective. Always has been. Saved my life once." "I think he knows how broken people sound," she murmured. Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching her. "You sound like you've had practice." She didn't deny it. Maybe I just recognized the look. He hesitated before asking, "What were you running from before you crashed?" For a moment she froze. Then she said, "Maybe the kind of life that runs without stopping to ask why." He nodded, not pressing further. Inside, she saw the small shelf by his workbench. Military ribbons, a folded flag, a photo of men in fatigues standing beside a Humvee. Dust had gathered on everything except one medal polished clean, the Bronze Star. "You never told me you were decorated," she said quietly. "Didn't seem important." "It is." He looked up at her. "Not here. Out here. What matters is whether the truck starts when you turn the key." They stood there in silence, surrounded by the soft ticking of cooling metal and the hum of the night outside. Alex finally said, "You ever think you were meant for something more?" Ethan's eyes found hers. "I did once. Then I realized more isn't always better." She smiled faintly, stepping closer. "You sound like someone who's made peace with the past." He shook his head. "Not peace. Just a truce." Rex barked softly, breaking the tension. They both laughed, and the moment dissolved into something lighter, something that hinted at a beginning neither had planned. Outside, the first stars appeared above the desert ridge. Copper Creek's single street lamp flickered to life, casting its small circle of light on the faded sign that read, "Coal Veterans Garage." In that glow, Alex saw what she hadn't before, that this town, this man, and even that old dog carried something the world had forgotten, a quiet faith that decency still mattered. And as she stood beside Ethan, she realized Copper Creek might be the first place in years that didn't expect her to be anyone but herself. The desert had its own kind of silence at night, not empty, but alive. Crickets whispered in the dry grass. Wind pressed through the dunes like a slow heartbeat. From the garage, the faint hum of the radio mixed with the soft clinking of tools as Ethan worked on an old Chevy. It was past midnight, but he couldn't sleep. Something about Alex had unsettled him in a way he didn't understand. She had been staying in the small spare room behind the garage for 3 days now, helping him fix cars, talking little, but watching everything. Her hands were too steady, her eyes too trained. Not the habits of a drifter. Rex stirred suddenly, ears pricking. The dog let out a low growl and trotted to the back door. Ethan frowned, wiped his hands on a rag, and followed. Outside, the night stretched vast and silver beneath the half-moon. Dust swirled gently around the old fence line. Then he saw her, Alex, standing near the water tank, phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp and clipped. He stopped just short of the doorway. "Cancel the meeting," she was saying, her tone cold enough to cut glass. "No, I said cancel it. I'm not signing off on Singapore until I see the numbers myself." There was a pause, then another voice. Faint male, through the satellite phone static. "I know what I'm doing," she continued. "No, the board doesn't need to know yet. I'll handle the fallout." Her words fell heavy in the air, not the kind of conversation that belonged to a wanderer stranded in the desert. Rex glanced back at Ethan, waiting for a cue. Ethan just stood there, silent. When she hung up, the phone disappeared into her jacket pocket in one smooth motion. She turned and froze. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough," he said quietly. Her posture shifted, ready but not defensive. "You're good at moving quietly for a man with boots that heavy. And you're good at hiding things for someone who claims she's just passing through." A flicker of annoyance, or maybe guilt, crossed her face. "It's not what you think. Then what is it?" She hesitated, eyes darting toward the horizon where the moonlight touched the hills. "It's business. Complicated business." Ethan folded his arms. "You used a satellite phone. Around here, folks use landlines, if they work. So unless you're calling Mars, that doesn't sound like small-town business." A pause. Then she sighed. "You're right, but not tonight." She brushed past him, the scent of dust and gasoline following her inside. He didn't stop her. Didn't need to. He'd seen that look before, in soldiers, in people carrying too much truth. You couldn't pry it out. You had to wait for it to surface. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. By daylight, Alex was all warmth and focus again, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, helping Ethan replace a transmission. The normalcy. Almost fooled him. Almost. Around noon, she came to him with an idea. "You ever been up to Carson's Ridge?" Ethan looked up from the engine. "That's about 20 miles east. Why?" "Heard it's got the best view of the valley. Thought maybe Rex could use a run. And you," she smiled faintly, "could use a break." He narrowed his eyes, but there was something disarming about the way she said it. Against his better judgment, he agreed. By late afternoon, they were driving his old truck up the dirt trail, Rex's head hanging happily out the window. The ridge rose from the desert like an island of stone, the air cooler as they climbed. When they reached the top, the world unfolded, Copper Creek shimmering below, small and peaceful, its rooftops glowing in the sunset. Alex stepped out first, stretching her arms toward the dying light. "Beautiful, isn't it? Used to be an old mining post," Ethan said, tossing Rex a stick. "My dad brought me up here once. Said the view reminds you how small your troubles really are." She smiled softly. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was," Ethan said, gazing at the horizon. "Didn't talk much either." They found an old wooden shack nearby, half buried in dust, the kind miners built when they thought gold would save them. Together they cleared the doorway, their laughter echoing against the rocks. Inside, the place was little more than a roof and a few planks, but Ethan spotted some old tools scattered in the corner. He picked up a rusted hammer. "Guess some things never die." Alex took it from him, turning it in her hands. "I used to run meetings, not tools," she said quietly. "Had an office with glass walls, a view of San Francisco Bay. Thought that was freedom. Turns out, this feels more real." Ethan studied her, his voice low. "Freedom's not where you stand. It's what you can walk away from." She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat, neither looked away. The wind moved through her hair, carrying the faint scent of sage. Then she laughed softly. "You sound like someone who's figured life out." He shook his head, just someone who stopped pretending he could. They spent the rest of the evening patching the roof with scrap wood, fixing what they could. When dusk fell, they sat outside on the ridge, a shared thermos of coffee between them. Rex lay nearby, tail flicking lazily. As the last light sank, the desert turned silver blue. Alex's face glowed faintly in the moonlight, eyes distant. "I used to manage thousands of people," she said. "Every decision felt like life or death. And yet I've never felt more alive than when I was holding that hammer." Ethan smiled. "Guess you just needed the right tool." She chuckled. "Maybe the right company." A silence followed, not heavy this time, but peaceful, the kind that binds rather than divides. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm meant to find something out here." Ethan looked at her, then at the vast emptiness stretching toward the horizon. "Maybe you already have." She didn't answer, just stared into the distance, as if searching for something she'd lost long ago. When they finally drove back down, the town lights flickered below like fallen stars. Ethan parked the truck by the garage. Alex sat still for a moment, watching the quiet streets. "You ever think places remember people?" she asked. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe it's the people who remember places." She nodded, opening the door. "Either way, Copper Creek feels like it's waiting for something." He watched her walk inside, the lantern light touching her shoulders. Rex stayed behind, eyes on Ethan, as if asking the question he wouldn't voice. "Can we trust her?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "I don't know, boy," he murmured, "but I want to." He looked up at the ridge, now just a dark outline against the stars. Somewhere beyond that, he could almost hear the echo of her voice on the phone, the sound of a life too big to fit inside his quiet world. And yet, for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in it. The morning after their trip to Carson's Ridge broke with a strange quiet. The desert felt heavy, as if the wind itself was holding its breath. Ethan woke early, brewed coffee, and fed Rex before unlocking the garage doors. The day smelled of dust and engine oil, his kind of peace. But the peace didn't last long. The sound of voices drifted from the diner across the street. Sarah's voice, sharp, excited, carried through the open window. "Turn it up, Frank. That's her." Ethan frowned, wiping his hands on a rag, and stepped outside. The old TV inside Sarah's diner flickered behind the smudged glass, colors flashing in the glare of the morning sun. He crossed the road, Rex trotting beside him, tail stiff. The diner was crowded, unusual for early hours. A dozen locals leaned over their plates, eyes glued to the screen. Sarah turned when she saw him, her expression a strange mix of awe and disbelief. "Ethan," she whispered, "you'd better take a look." He did. On the small TV, a news anchor spoke over a photo, the same face that had sat across from him last night by the campfire. The woman's hair was tied neatly back, her eyes fierce beneath studio lighting. The caption read, "Alexandra Sterling, tech mogul and CEO of Sterling Dynamics, reported missing." Ethan's stomach sank. The image changed, a montage of skyscrapers, luxury cars, boardrooms filled with polished executives. The anchor continued. Sterling, one of Silicon Valley's youngest billionaires, disappeared last week, following a controversial corporate deal with several global investors. Sources close to the company claim she abruptly withdrew from public view after canceling multiple international contracts, including the rumored Singapore partnership. Whispers rippled through the diner. "Missing?" Sarah muttered. "Lord have mercy." Ethan said nothing. He stared at the screen, his face unreadable, but inside something cracked open. On the TV, a brief clip played, Sterling stepping out of a limousine surrounded by cameras. Her voice, confident, poised, cut through the chaos. Technology should serve people, not replace them. The same voice he'd heard in the dark 2 nights ago. He turned slowly and walked out without a word. Rex followed, silent as his shadow. Back in the garage, Ethan stood beside the motorcycle, now clean, polished, perfectly running. The chrome gleamed under the light, reflecting his face in fractured pieces. "Alexandra Sterling," he whispered. The name felt foreign in his mouth, like a secret he wasn't meant to say aloud. A soft creak came from behind. He turned. She was standing at the doorway. Alex looked different now. The dust and grease were gone, replaced by an expression caught somewhere between guilt and relief. She held a brown envelope in her hands. "You saw it," she said simply. Ethan nodded. "Yeah. I didn't plan for it to happen this way." He crossed his arms. "I'm guessing there's a lot you didn't plan." She exhaled slowly. "My company was built on a lie I didn't see until too late. We developed systems that promised connection, but all they did was isolate people further. I wanted to fix it. The board didn't. So you ran." Her jaw tightened. "I left. There's a difference. Depends on what you're leaving behind." She met his gaze, eyes glassy in the morning light. "I left money, power, the illusion that any of it meant something. I wanted to see if there was still a place in the world where things worked without algorithms telling people how to feel." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. "And you chose Copper Creek?" "I didn't choose it," she said. "The storm did." He almost smiled at that, but didn't. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to remember what it's like to be treated like a person, not a headline." Silence filled the room. Outside, the wind pushed gently against the door, carrying the hum of the town waking up. Ethan set down the wrench he'd been holding. "You planning on leaving again?" Alex looked down at the envelope in her hands. "I thought I was, but now—" She hesitated. "Now I don't know what I want. I just know that this place, you, Rex, it's the first time in years I've felt something real." She stepped closer, her voice trembling slightly. "I came here running from a world that traded truth for profit. But this garage, this town, you still live by something I lost along the way." Ethan's expression softened, though his tone remained steady. "Out here, we don't measure worth in numbers. We measure it by what we fix and what we refuse to break." Her eyes glistened. "That's why I had to tell you before I go, before the world finds me again." He frowned. "You don't have to run, Alex." "You don't understand," she said. "They'll come looking, investors, reporters, maybe even lawyers. If they find me here, they'll drag you into it too." He took a step forward. "I've been dragged through worse." For the first time, she laughed, a small, broken sound that carried more truth than tears. "God, you make it sound simple." "It is," he said quietly. "You either fight for what matters, or you let it die." She stared at him for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Then she placed the envelope on the workbench. "Inside is a letter for you, and something else. A key. Keep it. Maybe it'll mean something one day." Ethan didn't move. "What key?" "You'll see," she said, managing a faint smile. Rex let out a soft whine as if sensing what was coming. Alex knelt and stroked his fur. "Hey, take care of him," she whispered. The dog nuzzled her hand, unwilling to let go. When she rose, she looked at Ethan one last time. "You told me freedom's about what we can walk away from," she said. "Maybe now I'll find out if I'm strong enough to walk toward something instead." Then she turned and stepped into the sunlight. Ethan stood at the doorway, watching her silhouette shrink down the dusty road, the wind tugging at her jacket. She didn't look back. He waited there long after she vanished, until the horizon swallowed her whole. Finally, he opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter written in neat, precise handwriting, and a small, gleaming key with the initials A.S. engraved on it. He unfolded the paper. "Ethan, you reminded me that not everything broken needs to be replaced. Some things are worth the time it takes to repair. If I ever build something again, I want it to be with the kind of faith you still carry. Alex." At the bottom was a phone number. He read the letter twice, then once more, before placing it back in the envelope. The key rested in his palm, small, cold, full of questions. Rex pressed against his leg, eyes searching his face. Ethan knelt beside him. "Looks like she left us more than a mystery, huh?" The dog tilted his head. Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess we'll have to see where it leads." Outside, the desert wind picked up again, scattering dust through the air, the same dust that had once hidden a stranger on a motorcycle. But this time, the sound felt different. Not the beginning of a storm, but the quiet breath that comes after one. And in that stillness, Ethan Cole understood something he hadn't in years, that sometimes the truth doesn't arrive like thunder. It walks in quietly, changes everything, and leaves behind a letter and a key. Days in Copper Creek had a rhythm all their own, steady, quiet, and unchanging. But since Alex left, the silence inside Ethan's garage had grown louder. It filled every corner like dust. Even Rex, once content to nap through the afternoons, now waited by the door as if expecting footsteps that would never return. The letter sat on Ethan's workbench, its edges already smudged with oil from his hands. He'd read it more times than he'd admit, that neat, careful handwriting looping like a steady heartbeat across the page. "If I ever build something again, I want it to be with the kind of faith you still carry." The words haunted him, not like a memory, but like a promise left unfinished. Outside, the desert rolled beneath a pale sky. Spring was just beginning to soften the land. Ethan tightened the last bolt on an old Ford, then leaned back, staring at the mountains beyond the highway. He'd fixed half the town's vehicles that week, but nothing could fix the hollow ache that had settled behind his ribs. Rex patted over, nudging the envelope with his nose. The key inside clinked softly against the bench. Ethan chuckled under his breath. "You too, huh? Think I should call her?" The dog tilted his head, ears twitching. His usual answer when he agreed but didn't understand. Ethan sighed, took the letter again, and stared at the number written neatly at the bottom. A part of him resisted. The part that still believed in staying where you were put, in letting silence be enough. But another part, the one that had carried him through sandstorms and firefights, whispered that some calls weren't meant to be ignored. He reached for the phone. The first ring nearly stopped his heart. The second echoed in the emptiness of the shop. Then a click, a soft exhale, her voice. "Ethan?" He froze. For a moment, words refused to form. "Yeah," he said finally, voice low. "It's me." Silence hummed between them, fragile, but alive. Then she laughed, quiet, breathless, like she hadn't expected to hear him again. "I wasn't sure you'd call." "I wasn't sure either," he admitted. "Guess Rex made the decision." "I should have known," she said. "He always understood things faster than we did." He smiled faintly, the sound of her voice unraveling something tight in his chest. "How are you holding up?" "Alive," she said after a pause, "and trying to make sense of what comes next." Ethan leaned against the counter, eyes on the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. "I read your letter." "I figured you would," she said. "Did you find the key?" "Yeah, it's small, brass, old. Looks like it fits something important." "It does." she said softly. "It's to my father's old workshop. He was a mechanic, too, before I thought I was too smart for that life. The building's abandoned now, outside San Jose, but I've decided to reopen it. Not as a tech lab, as a start." He frowned. "A start?" "A program," she said, voice steadying. "A fund for small workshops owned by veterans and craftsmen, people like you. Places that build with their hands, not spreadsheets. I want to call it Hands and Heart." The name hung in the air, simple and bar. Ethan didn't speak for a while. "You're serious?" "I am," she said. "I canceled every contract tied to Sterling Dynamics. It's messy, but I don't care. The world's full of things that work but don't mean anything anymore. I want to fix that." He exhaled. "That's a hell of a dream." "It's more than a dream. It's what I should have done years ago." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "You're going to need help." "That's why I left the key," she said. "Because I want you to be part of it." He blinked, caught off guard. "Me?" "You," she said gently. "You fix what others give up on. People, engines, yourself. That's what this project needs." He didn't answer right away. His fingers tightened around the phone, the weight of her words pressing deep. "I'm no businessman, Alex. I turn wrenches, not worlds." "Maybe that's exactly why you should," she said. "I've met thousands of people who talk about changing things. You're the only one who just does it." The line went quiet again, but not empty. He could almost hear her breathing, the faint hum of city life behind her, a distant contrast to the whispering wind through his open door. Finally, he said, "You really think a couple of garages can make a difference?" "I think anything built with honesty can," she replied. "I used to believe progress came from scale. Now I know it comes from purpose." Ethan smiled, small but real. "You always did talk prettier than me." "That's what makes us a good team," she teased. "You build, I talk." For the first time in weeks, he laughed, a low, unguarded sound that startled Rex into wagging his tail. "You really want to do this?" "Yes," she said, "and I want to start in Copper Creek. I've already arranged a grant for the town's community center. It'll include a veterans workshop, training for young mechanics. Caleb, Miguel, the kids you've been teaching. I called Sarah earlier to make sure she'd keep it quiet until I told you." He shook his head, half amused, half in disbelief. "You've been busy." "Old habits," she said with a hint of pride. "But I'm doing it right this time." He looked at the key again, the brass glinting in his hand. For the first time, it didn't feel like a weight. It felt like direction. "You know," he said quietly, "you once told me you were trying to find something real. Maybe this is it." "Maybe," she said, "but only if you'll be part of it." He took a long breath, looking around the garage, the oil stains on the floor, the tools his father left behind, the flag folded neatly on the wall. It was all he'd ever known. Yet somehow it no longer felt like the end of something, but the beginning. "Then I guess," he said finally, "it's time to start the engine." On the other end of the line, he could almost hear her smile. "That sounds like a yes?" "It is." She laughed softly, relief breaking through. "Good, because I already booked a flight to Nevada. I'll be in Copper Creek by Friday." He blinked. "You what?" "I told you," she said. "I'm done running. This time I'm driving back." The warmth in her voice lingered long after the call ended. Ethan lowered the phone and stood in silence for a while, feeling something he hadn't in years. Hope, small but steady, humming through his veins like a long, idle motor finding rhythm again. Rex barked once, sensing his mood. Ethan knelt beside him. "Guess we're going to have company, partner." The dog wagged his tail and trotted toward the door, already ready for whatever came next. Later that evening, Ethan went out to the ridge alone. The wind was cool, the sky a wash of amber fading into deep violet. Below, the town glowed softly, a handful of lights holding their own against the vast dark. He pulled the letter from his jacket, reading it one last time before folding it carefully into his pocket. Then he looked out toward the horizon where the highway vanished into night. "Guess it's our turn to move forward," he murmured. Rex sat beside him, eyes fixed on the same horizon. And as the stars came out, one by one, Ethan Cole, the soldier, the mechanic, the man who once thought life had left him behind, felt something click into place inside him. The sound was faint, almost imagined, like an engine starting. 3 months later, the sign above the garage gleamed in the sunlight. Bold, simple, carved by hand. Cole and Sterling Automotive, Veterans Garage Initiative. It hung from the same wooden beam that once bore his father's sign, the old lettering still faintly visible beneath the varnish. Ethan had refused to paint over it. Some things weren't meant to be erased. They were meant to stand together. The desert air was crisp that morning. The monsoon rains had passed, leaving the world smelling of sage and metal. A faint breeze rattled the American flag by the doorway, its edges worn but proud. Inside, the garage was alive again. Tools hummed, laughter echoed. The once quiet shop now buzzed with the rhythm of work, an orchestra of hands and heart. Caleb Dunn and Miguel Torres were at the bench, elbows deep in an engine, arguing over a carburetor's proper alignment. Their overalls were stained, faces smudged, but their spirits were high. "Left turn, Miguel," Caleb barked. "I am turning left," Miguel snapped back, though he grinned. Ethan passed behind them, smirking. "You two argue more than the bolts you strip. Check the intake valve. That's where the leak's been." "Yes, sir," they chorused in unison. Rex trotted between them, tail wagging, carrying a dirty rag in his mouth like a medal. The garage had become his kingdom again, the scent of oil and people he trusted. Outside, the hum of a drone camera drifted over the town square. 2 young filmmakers from Reno had come to record footage for the new Hands and Heart program, Alex's idea, of course. She wanted the world to see what could grow when technology remembered its purpose. And then, as if summoned by the thought, her voice carried from the doorway. "Careful, boys," Alex called out. "That carburetor's worth more than my first car." Ethan turned, wiping his hands. She stood framed in the morning light, hair pulled back under a navy bandana, sleeves rolled up, jeans dusted with grease. There was still a hint of Silicon Valley polish in her eyes, but it was softened by the raw sun of Copper Creek. "You're early," he said, though the corner of his mouth betrayed a smile. She shrugged, walking in. "Couldn't sleep. I think the desert missed me." Rex barked once in approval before rushing to her side. She bent to scratch his ears, laughing. "At least someone's happy to see me." "Don't push your luck," Ethan said dryly. Alex glanced around the garage. "You've done wonders. It looks alive." He nodded. "It is, and so are they." He gestured to Caleb and Miguel, now watching discreetly from the corner, trying to look like they weren't staring at the woman who had once been on the cover of Forbes. Alex smiled. "They'll be running this place before long. Maybe. I'll settle for them, remembering to tighten their bolts." She laughed, then turned to the wall near the entrance. There, beside his father's photograph and the flag, hung a new plaque, the Hands and Heart insignia. Beneath it, the words, "For those who still build with purpose." Her hand lingered on the metal letters. "Your father would have liked this," she said softly. Ethan's voice dropped. He believed in fixing things, even when they weren't his to fix. She looked at him then, eyes warm. "So do you." He didn't argue. Instead, he motioned toward the workbench. "Come on, Ms. CEO. Time to get your hands dirty." "Oh no," she teased. "You just want me to ruin another wrench. Only one way to find out." They worked side by side through the morning, her laughter echoing off the walls as she fumbled with bolts and wiped sweat from her forehead. It wasn't perfect. She stripped a screw, dropped a socket, and burned her thumb once. But Ethan didn't mind. The garage had always been a place for second chances, and she fit into it perfectly. By noon, Sarah Henderson arrived with a box of sandwiches and her usual commentary. "If it isn't my favorite grease-stained lovebirds," she said, dropping the food on the table. "The whole town's talking about you two." Ethan rolled his eyes. "That's because you keep telling them." Sarah winked. Someone has to keep the legend alive, a billionaire and a mechanic saving America one carburetor at a time. It's practically a romance novel. Alex blushed. "Sarah, please." But the older woman was already waving her off. "Don't you please me, sweetheart. You brought life back to this town. That's something worth gossiping about." When she left, Alex turned to Ethan, half laughing, half exasperated. "Does she ever stop?" "Nope. That's her way of saying she cares." They ate in comfortable silence, the smell of oil and bread mingling in the air. Outside, the drone hovered, catching the shot, the mechanic, the entrepreneur, and the dog at the center of something quietly miraculous. Later that afternoon, Alex gathered everyone in the garage. Caleb, Miguel, even Frank Dillard from the fire department, who'd come by with his cap in hand. She stood in the middle, holding a small box. This, she said, opening it, is a prototype, our first partnership between Hands and Heart and Sterling Tech, built right here in Copper Creek. Inside was a compact engine part, sleek, efficient, and hand-forged from recycled metal, a fusion of technology and craftsmanship. Ethan lifted it, inspecting it closely. Lightweight, balanced. "Hybrid injector," Alex explained. "Designed by your students, manufactured locally. If it works, it'll be used in restoration projects across the country." Caleb grinned. "You mean we built that?" "You did," she said. "You're the first chapter in what we're building together." Applause filled the garage, genuine, unfiltered. Even Rex barked twice as if joining in. As evening fell, the crowd dispersed, and the last rays of sun poured through the open door. The desert beyond glowed gold and copper, a horizon reborn. Alex leaned against the truck beside Ethan, the warmth of the day still on her skin. "When I left Silicon Valley, I thought I was walking away from everything I'd built," she said. "But I think this is what I was meant to build all along." He looked out over the town, the faint hum of laughter drifting from Sarah's diner. "Funny thing about engines," he said, "so no. You can rebuild them 100 times, but they only run right when every part remembers where it came from." She smiled. "Is that your poetic way of saying we're finally in sync?" He smirked. "Something like that." Rex settled between them, head resting on his paws, content. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at the edges of the flag. Far off, the first stars began to appear. Alex followed Ethan's gaze toward the ridge beyond town, Carson's Ridge, glowing faintly in the twilight. "Still your favorite spot?" she asked. "Always," he said. "Want to see why?" A few minutes later, they stood there again, high above the valley. The world below shimmered with small human light, porch lamps, garage signs, diner windows. Between them and the desert stretched a bridge of road connecting every glimmer. Alex inhaled the dry, clean air. "It's beautiful." "It's home," Ethan said simply. She turned to him, voice gentle. "Do you think we came at the right time?" He looked at her, the corners of his eyes creasing into a smile. "Every engine starts when it's ready. We just have to keep turning the key." The wind carried their laughter across the ridge. Behind them, Copper Creek glowed softly, a beacon for anyone who had forgotten what it meant to begin again. And as the sun disappeared beneath the horizon, Rex lay at their feet, his fur catching the last trace of gold. In that quiet, the old soldier and the woman who had once ruled empires stood side by side, not as opposites, but as proof that two broken worlds, when bridged by faith and work, could start anew. The desert wind shifted once more, not carrying dust this time, but the sound of hammers, laughter, and engines. The sound of something living, something honest. The sound of everything starting again. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or wings, they arrive quietly, through people who still choose to fix what's broken. Ethan and Alex didn't just rebuild a garage, they rebuilt faith. Faith in work, in kindness, in second chances. Maybe that's how God still speaks to us, not through grand signs, but through steady hands, open hearts, and small acts that keep hope alive when the world feels silent. If this story touched your heart, share it. Leave a comment about what faith means to you. And don't forget to subscribe so together we can keep spreading stories of grace, compassion, and the quiet miracles that happen every day. May God bless you and your family, and may His light guide the work of your hands, just like it did for Ethan, Alex, and Rex.